Today's episode is sponsored by Land Gorilla, the premier software for managing renovation and construction loans. Let's face it, renovation loans can be messy, but your draw management shouldn't be. Land Gorilla brings draw requests, disbursements, change orders, and project data all into one single experience. The platform eliminates communication gaps so you can deliver faster draws and scale your pipeline safely. Learn more at landgorilla.com. In this episode, we're going to talk about selling direct or selling to an investor, choosing the right takeout strategy for your renovation loans. If you've been listening to this series in order, you might be thinking, okay, we've talked about commitment, we've talked about hiring the right person, we talked about building the platform. So naturally, the next question is, should we sell renovation loans direct or should we sell them to an investor? And if you're hoping for a simple answer, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you because there's no universally right answer. There's only a strategic one. It's based on your experience, your infrastructure, your risk tolerance, your long-term goals. It's going to be an individualistic answer. In this episode, I want to walk you through the pros and cons of both approaches, kind of giving the operational reality lenders live with after the loans close. Before we dive in, let's level set. This isn't about whether selling direct is better than selling to an investor or vice versa, and it's not about which investors are good or not so good. It's just about understanding where control lives, where risk lives, where flexibility lives, where reputational exposure lives, because renovation lending, it amplifies all of those things. Let's start with selling direct to the agencies. One of the biggest advantages, flexibility. When you sell direct, you decide what overlay to impose or where you can afford to be flexible. You're not boxed into an investor's interpretation of guidelines, and you can design your platform to serve real borrower needs instead of an investor's risk tolerance. Second, guaranteed delivery. If the loan meets agency guidelines, you don't have any worries. There's no anxiety about whether an agency is going to balk at a lender's interpretation of TRID guidelines and fee disclosure, your contractor validation process, or guideline interpretation. All of that matters, especially with renovation loans. And third, fee retention. Selling direct, it allows lenders to retain financeable origination fees on FHA 203K loans or draw management fees on other loans. Those fees can materially offset the real costs of administering draws, something too many lenders underestimate. Fourth, and this one is critical, control over draw administration. When you manage draws yourself, you control the timing, you control the communication, you control flexibility when reasonable issues arise, and that protects your reputation with contractors, with consultants, with real estate agents, with borrowers, and in renovation lending, reputation travels fast. Finally, there's no scrambling when an investor exits the space, and if you lived through it, you know. Investors can and do exit renovation lending with very little notice, so selling direct eliminates that vulnerability. Let's talk about the cons, the other side. First, agency approval. Many renovation products are going to require agency approval, documented experience, and demonstrated draw management competence. Sometimes if you outsource draw management to a vendor, that'll suffice. So for newer platforms, that can be a real barrier. Second, pricing. In many cases, selling direct results in higher rates than investor execution. That doesn't mean it's wrong, but it does mean that you need to understand how it's going to impact your competitiveness. And third, draw administration responsibility. If you sell direct draws, they're your problem. You either build internal expertise or outsource to a vendor. And here's the truth, draw administration is both a pro and a con, depending on how prepared you are to manage it well. Let's shift to selling to an investor and talk about the pros. So one advantage is additional guidance. Many investors that have a renovation lending division, they can answer your questions, they can review files, they can provide some structure, and that could be very helpful, especially early on. That said, the guidance is often investor specific, overlay driven, and sometimes, at least in my experience, incomplete. I've personally put investors through their paces by asking questions they couldn't answer, waiting days, sometimes weeks for answers, which is why I always recommend going directly to the agencies for definitive guidance. Another advantage is draw administration being handled by the investor. If they do it well, this can be a huge benefit. It allows lenders to sit back and observe, to learn, and then slowly build internal understanding before they take it on themselves. And yes, pricing. Investor execution can be materially better than retaining loans. That could improve your competitiveness, increase margins, though that benefit can be offset by pre-close review costs, additional fees, borrower paid costs. So lots to weigh there. Now let's talk about the risks of selling to an investor, the cons. First, there's takeout risk. If your only investor exits renovation lending, your pipeline freezes. And I've seen this happen more times than I care to count. Second, reputational risk tied to draw performance. If an investor manages draws poorly, it results in slow disbursements. It can result in poor communication, inconsistent inspections. Your borrowers, they don't blame the investor, they blame you. And third, overlay and outdated guidance. Some investors impose heavy overlays, or they have very restrictive interpretations or outdated policies, which can make otherwise viable loans impossible to close. So keep that in mind as you are reviewing investor overlay. And fourth, response time. Like I said, I have literally waited weeks for answers from investors on, for example, disclosure-related questions, TRID guidance. That kind of delay is unacceptable when there are live files in your pipeline. And finally, disclosure and guideline rigidity. Some investors require renovation fees to be disclosed in very specific ways, and one investor may apply, we'll use this as an example, contingency reserves to hard costs, while another applies them to the total renovation costs. And those are just a couple of examples where you have differences between investors. So if that loan doesn't get purchased by one investor, you may have made it harder or impossible to sell it elsewhere. And that's a risk many lenders don't realize until it's too late. So what's the answer? The answer isn't always sell direct, and it isn't always sell to an investor. The real answer is this: your takeout strategy, it must match your platform maturity. So early stage platforms, they can benefit from investor execution if the investor is strong. More mature platforms may outgrow investor constraints and move toward direct delivery. And regardless of the path you choose, it's always good to have a backup to understand where the risk lives, and never choose pricing over platform performance. As we wrap up this episode, keep in mind renovation lending rewards intentional decisions and it punishes casual ones. Selling direct, it offers control, but it demands experience. Selling to an investor offers support, but it introduces dependency. Neither path is wrong, but choosing without understanding the trade-offs, that's where lenders get hurt. In the next episode, I'm going to review a couple of books authored by renovation loan officers, so stay tuned if you want to get a glimpse into what others are saying about renovation loans and my opinion on the matter. Thanks for spending part of your day with me. This is renovatED for lenders. Thank you for listening to renovatED for lenders. This episode was brought to you by Land Gorilla. Deliver clarity to borrowers, contractors, and your operations team with the industry's most trusted draw management solutions. Visit landgorilla.com today.